Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Iain Stewart, and I'm really interested in science communication, how we can take complex technical ideas and communicate it to non-technical audience. I'm a geologist, a geoscientist, so many of my examples come from how we convey information about the planet. But some of the issues that I'm talking about are generic and actually relate to lots and lots of different issues. So let me just take you through the talk that I've got, and I think the first thing to emphasize is that what I want to encourage you all to do is to be science communicators. It is the most fun thing in the world, really. So let me just bring this up full screen. So hopefully you can all see that. So my question to you, my provocation, if you like, is why do you want to communicate science? What is it? What is the purpose? What is your mission in communicating science? And that's a really fundamental question. This image comes from the Altiplano in Bolivia, salt flats there, one of the most extraordinary places on the planet that I've ever been. And I'm going to use that as a backdrop, really, of some of the issues then that sit underneath this issue about why we're actually communicating science in the first place. But first of all, to the actual idea of science communication. In the top left there, you see what I see as a kind of landscape of science communication. The vertical axis is what is the motivation of the scientist, if you like? Is it in the bottom there, knowledge driven? It's about finding out facts and information and telling people amazing things about the planet. Or at top, problem driven? Is it being given problems by society and helping solve those issues? And then along the bottom is the extent to which we invite the public in, going from low on the right to high on the right, and the low on the left and high on the right. And so what you see scattered across that plot then are different types of engagement with increasing amounts of engagement into the public realm. So the first thing is that science communication is incredibly diverse, and it goes from obviously right at the bottom left, being very academic and writing academic articles and conferences, but then starting to popularize them maybe in magazines or in public talks or in kind of YouTube films. And then as you go further out, really get into the much more the public realm of television and social media and festivals and things like that. On the right hand side, a set of graphs really that shows where people get their information from. The red one is the internet. The green one is television and the blue one is newspapers. And the top graph is for generic news issues. And that suggests that until relatively recently, we've largely got our news from television. The middle one shows that for science and technology in general, so why we're here, really, about 10 years ago, the internet became the dominant platform for that. And if you go to specific issues, specific scientific issues, it's always been the internet really over the last decade or two. And so that's really important. So the internet is gathering steam as a really critical communication landscape. And then I've just shown you in the bottom left there, the various social media platforms, just to make the point that social media is obviously taken off. But even there, different social media platforms are basically target different types of audiences. And this is something I'll come back to. Who is it that you're wanting to reach? And therefore, that'll predetermine the platform that you use and some of the engagements that you then go on to. So that's one set of backgrounds, really. And the other one really is about more of the academic world around science communication. Lots and lots of literature on this. There's journals, there's academic courses on science communication. And I've tried to break them down into two end members really here. Again, on this idea of motivation versus participation of the public. So in the bottom left was the long established idea that of public understanding of science, that our job as experts, as scientists, is to convey what we know to the people who don't know it. And that it's called the deficit model, with the assumption that the ordinary people have some kind of deficit of information, and our purpose, our job, is to fill that, overcome that deficit. And once, and this is a crucial bit, once they have that information, they'll see the world in the same way that we do, and science will be able to inform policy, etc., etc. On the top right, there's a different model, which is public engagement, which actually says, look, actually, we can't tell the public all these facts, and actually facts are very contentious, and really the critical issues is that people engage with science, that they're interested in it, they think it's cool, they think scientists are cool. And so that's referred to as the dialogue model, because it's about trying to think about what are the public interested in. Let's give the public what they want in terms of, for example, for geoscience, it's volcanoes and it's dinosaurs and things like that. But let's be, engaged with the public over their perception, their attitudes towards science. I'm going to recast those in a way using kind of business marketing rhetoric, really. The same thing. And the point that I'm going to make here is that I'm going to refer to the public understanding area as make and sell, whereby it's a production process in a company that makes a product and then sells it out via its sales team. And I'm going to contrast that with the engagement mode, which I refer to as sense and respond, which is sensing who your audience is and tailoring your messages better to that audience. But the key point is a shift, really, between on the left, in the academic world, is using communication to convey matters of fact, to on the right, addressing what the audience feels as matters of their concern. So it's a fundamental shift, really, about where you place the emphasis. Is the emphasis on us as the experts, or is the emphasis on the public as the recipients of this communication? And as I'll show later on, I think both of these models are inadequate for the purposes that we need at the present day, and we need to push past them. So anyway, let's start with the easy stuff. How do we communicate? Well, this is the make and sell. How do we sell our science? So for me, it's been television. So since 2002, been working with BBC, making television documentaries about the planet. So selling the planet in different ways around the climate, about earthquakes and volcanoes, things to do with dinosaurs or energy, lots and lots of different ways to popularize the planet. And here are the key messages about what works in that context. One is capturing the wonder, the amazement of, in our case, the planet. Capturing the geopoetry, as this quote refers to, places like this as Nazca, Nika Cave in northern Mexico, these extraordinary crystals. So that it's about taking people from their world into our world and showing them how amazing it is. And that could be a miniature world of a microscope, it could be a kind of astronomical, cosmological scale, or it could be somewhere like this. The second one is that, as I intimated before, that it's not about facts, that facts are things that people pick up and use, but they're actually not that interesting. What is more interesting and what's more enduring is stories. So if you can tell a story, to tell that story, you have to have facts in the story for the story to work. And people remember the story as the vehicle, and they might mix up some of the facts, but you convey the overall message much more importantly. The trouble is academics tend to like facts, and we tend to think facts are really important. And we get very upset when people have fake facts and things like that. So here's a message from two climate scientists about climate communications. So try to craft messages that are simple, memorable, repeat them, make effective use of imagery, metaphor, narrative, be a better storyteller, lead with what you know, and let your passion show. All of these are absolutely critical, but they're not seen as key skills that a scientist should have, but they are key skills, I think, that a science communicator should have. Another critical point is about starting where your audience is, not where you are, really. And it's about so what, it's about relevance. So what you see in the image here is someone lighting the tap in Pennsylvania and methane gas coming out. So this relates to the controversy around fracking for energy, which is obviously something that's of great anxiety and great concern to people. So the graphic in the bottom right just shows that the green is the way that scientists think. We immerse ourselves in lots of information, detail, we drill in more and more detail, we finally get something we want to communicate that's about that size, and we communicate it out. But the public are in the red, or the politicians or whoever are in the red zone. They start with that sharp point here, where the first thing they'll say to you if you start to communicate is, Why are you telling me this? What relevance does this have for my everyday life? And the point is, if you can't make that connection at that point, there is no communication. So finding ways to make the connection to people's everyday world, everyday concerns, allows you to basically dive into their world and get more and more detail. And eventually, if you're good at it, you'll get more and more of your detail across to them because they're interested. You've made it relevant to them. One of the fundamental aspects is that that actually people's story, that people engage with people. And this is what this quote talks about. It talks about scientists being mentally unusual because we're not that interested in people, we're interested in things and ideas, but everyone else is interested in people. So if we can convey our facts or stories through the stories, the narratives of people, then again, they stick in people's heads and they care about them much more. And of course, one of the people is you. You as the investigator, as the scientist, are actually quite interested. One of the reasons is you're mentally unusual. You might not feel it, but you're mentally unusual. You do strange things that most people don't do. Now, in science, we tend to take the scientist out. We're objective, we're neutral, and all the rest of it. And that might work for science. I'm not sure it really does for science, but certainly for communication, that's terrible because people buy into you as the gateway to the science. And if they don't find you very interesting, they're not likely to find the science very interesting. So you're a really important part of this process. So the key point there really is, that seems quite far away from academic science, and that's the point. That this has to engage people. It's got to be entertaining, and in that sense, it's really important to realize that we're stepping out of the academic world and stepping into the entertainment industry. That we need to approach this quote that talks about approaching the media less from the point of view of educators, which is where we come from, and more on the point of view of almost thinking like public relations and marketing and advertising, to create a more favorable impression of our science so that people just think it's interesting, just think it's cool. So that's the selling bit. That's how we make our science, and then we sell it out to the public. The public hasn't asked for it, and we say, hey, it's fantastic, go and have some of this. Now I want to look at it the other way around, which is that idea about who is this public? What are they interested in? And how can we connect what we're interested in better with what they're interested in? So this is about the science of the public, really, rather than understanding the public understanding of science. It's science understanding the public. So here's a classic example. This is from climate change. This is the so-called Six Americas, published in 2019, the latest one, which looks at American US attitudes to climate change. And you'll see that about a third almost are alarmed, and there's a big chunk concerned, cautious, disengaged, all the way through to 10% of people that think it's a load of rubbish. And so they are all very different publics, and they have got different levels of knowledge and information and values and all the rest of it, and they need different communication modes to reach them. This is a UK version of this, the 7 British segments of the public. I'm not going to go into this in detail. This is some work that Climate Outreach have done. But you can see the 7, and you can see it's roundly, it reflects people's politics and the values and the norms, but that depending on, so you'll see it plotted out there in terms of the first questions about should we focus on global action to protect the environment, and the bottom one is about, do you discuss climate change and pollution with your friends? And you'll see that they scatter. They have different value systems that underpin this. And therefore, our communications are much more effective if we understand who we're trying to reach and how we can best reach them. So this is a nice study the Australian CSIRO organization did around community attitudes. And what they did, it's very simple. On the basis of values, had 4 publics, if you like. The green ones, the A ones, are the most pro-science and technology. The science fans, they like science. Science is important. Science is good. Cautiously keen group, the blue group B, say, well, yeah, science is okay, but there's other things alongside science. The yellow group, the risk averse, is about science is turbulent and messes everything up. Why can't we just go back to the way things used to be? And then D group is the one that is either concerned about science, thinks science is the problem, or just interested in other stuff, they're just disengaged. And across a set of values, and the values themselves aren't important, you'll see them down the left. The key point is to look to the right, to these colors, and you'll see that most of those groups, the Bs, particularly the C, B, and D, overlap. They share common values for some of these issues, except the green group. The green group, the science fans, the A group, tends to be at the extreme, one end or the other, disconnected. It's the outlier. So it's decoupled. It's not shared values. And that's a really important aspect, because the sharing of values turns out to be a critical part of communication. So this is a graphic really that just talks about the way that communication really works, particularly in areas of conflict or of contested science. So if you're dealing with something, it could be the pandemic, it could be a disaster, it could be climate change. You're often making decisions fast. Time is poor. There's vast amounts of data out there, huge amounts of uncertainty, and the topics is often connected with some kind of fear, emotional things. So that makes it really problematic environment. So in that environment, what we know from cognitive science, from social science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, is that when information is complex, people make decisions based on their values and beliefs, not facts, or not necessarily facts. So values and beliefs turn out to be really important. They then realize that they've made quite a intuitive, a gut instinct decision on that. So they look for more information. But when they look for more information, they're looking to confirm their fundamental values and beliefs, that they've made the right decision, not to have them questioned, not to counter them. That means that they're going to reject any information that runs counter to their values and beliefs, even if that comes from very expert sources. Number 3 is this point of trust, that people trust those whose values they think mirror their own. So that's important, because those trusted people might not be experts, probably will not be experts. It's people in their family or friends or things like that they'll ask about technical issues. And if they feel that they don't have shared values with an expert, then they can just make that, they can tune out, they can just disregard that information, because it's not trusted information in the way that they think about it. So the overall conclusion then is that opinions aren't formed by logic or facts, which is the operating principles of scientists, if you like, that they're not influenced by logical factual arguments of scientists. So we spend a lot of our time developing these factual arguments with good quality information. And what we find is that that's not how people make decisions, because people make decisions on that individual basis, that cognitive understanding. But then there's the friends around them, the interpersonal networks, the organizations they work for, their community, and then the wider kind of government public policy. So that the way that people make decisions about science is much more complex and nuanced than the way that the scientists generally communicate the information in the first place. So that brings us to this notion from science communicators that we need a different way of doing this. So here's an example which talks about, the old ways of these different silos of, say, the environmental science that provides information, technical data, and models about the world, the environment. And then there's the other ones, the creative arts, social sciences, and philosophy, and religion. And the argument is that for many of the issues that we have at the present day, really complex, interconnected issues, we need to bring all those areas together. So yes, we've got the environmental sciences that provides the facts, but we've got the creative arts that will provide ways of inspiring and motivating and providing meaning to connect with people. We've got the social sciences, the psychology and sociology, really understanding how we frame information, how people have mental models of things, and how we can develop better communication channels. And then lastly, but definitely not leastly, is the fact of the philosophy and religion, because many of the issues that we face are moral, ethical issues about, should we do this or should we do that, because it's got implications for the planet. And so ethics, as we've seen, values and world beliefs really are fundamental to communication. So all of this means that we've shifted in terms of science communication from this expert-driven, top-down way of communicating to much more trying to people-centered approach, trying to be in communities, understanding. This is an image of some students, geoscientists that I work with, where we went into the community, happens to be Istanbul, talking to real ordinary people and trying to find out what it was that they were worried about, in this case about earthquake risk in Istanbul. But we need to have the people front and center in our communications. So one of the issues really I think that's interesting is that since 2015, a whole set of things has changed. 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement came in, the Sustainable Development Goals, and for those that work like myself in disaster risk, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And all of them talked about trying to engage much more with a people-centered approach to this, to get away from just telling people what to do, to find out much more about what they needed and engaging bottom-up, grassroots, etc. And this reflects a change in the mode of communication that's kind of shown in the bottom left there. So mode one is this classic academically driven, and then we might have this academic driven but inspired by the needs of society. And then as we drift out into mode two, it's driven by society, and it's really a third, so-called third mission of universities. And then as we push out into what's called post-normal, is co-production, co-producing science with communities, with the publics. And social learning is actually engaging in science in natural laboratories in the public realm in order to understand much, much better how knowledge is developed and built across different communities. And so, as you'll see, more and more of an attempt to bring the public into our world. So that leads me to my third area. So I had this make and sell, and I had sense and respond. And my argument is that neither of those are really up to the job of these complex issues around sustainability and environment, the climate and ecological catastrophe that's underway. So that's Guide and Co-Create is about understanding your sense of purpose. So the guidance suggests that you have some knowledge and expertise, but the Co-Create indicates that you need to co-create that with whoever you're trying to communicate with. So let me give you an example. This is an advert for Patagonia, the clothes manufacturer. It says, don't buy this jacket. What are they getting at? It says, instead of putting the money to buy this jacket, click onto this link, take the pledge and reduce consumption. What that's doing is it sends out a very subtle positive message that Patagonia is a good company, it's a nice company, it cares about the planet, and that you're a good person and you're a nice person, so you fit with the values of the company. And the chances are you'll do that and take the pledge, and you'll probably buy the jacket as well. And the jacket's probably more expensive, but it's a good company. So this really indicates this idea of the emergence of what's called social value, of a well-being economy, and the emergence of so-called purpose-led businesses, that where profit maximization is not the end goal as much as around social value, for example, and a sense of purpose. So what I mean by purpose, well, here we have at the top, purpose is the pursuit of an ambitious, clear, enduring, and overarching goal, which is motivating. And again, what I've done there is I've recast this graph to show this idea of us moving from make and sell, where we're very much in that academic realm, into that science being the expert-led, into the sense and respond, which is saying, actually, we can understand it better, be better communicators if we can understand how people think and process information. But to be honest, that's still just allowing us to target our information more effectively to them, to the public. And so the ultimate area, I think, in science communication is this guide and co-create, where we're trying to use not knowledge, not facts, but wisdom, our collective intellectual wisdom of how things work, to address real problems, the problems of living, for example, everyday problems, whether it's climate change, social inequity, environmental pollution, whatever it is. And the skill set in a guide and co-create communication realm is very different to those that's in make and sell. It's about how to develop interdisciplinary working to knock down the barriers between the different disciplines. It's how are you participatory? How do you invite in different voices, including non-expert voices, public voices, into the process of the scientific endeavor? And being reflective. It's about thinking, is this the right method? Should I use something else? Being genuinely self-critical about the process that you're doing. And it all relates in an academic sense to this notion of the universities being places of wisdom that could get used much more effectively to address societal concerns. But in terms of the individual, I think it brings in a real ethical dilemma, which is before science communication can start, you have to think, what is my purpose? What kind of communicator do I want to be? So what we see in the there's kind of 5 different science communicators. The ones at the back are under conventional science, and it's either the top left, it's the knowledge worker. So someone who is basically interested in academic research, they want to find out stuff, and then they want to tell people that information. It's not information the public's asked for, but the person thinks they will be interested in it. Scientist is a lobbyist tool. It's referred to as the luggage carrier. And that's when the scientist basically addresses these issues that's come to them from society and sorts that out. But in the new transformative or so-called post-normal science of the Sendai framework with SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, there are new types of scientists that are emerging. The facilitator. The scientist is this knowledge broker between two worlds, the scientific world and the public world, a neutral, objective arbiter of that. And then there's the catalyst, the scientist that because of their technical understanding actually starts to initiate solutions and change. And then finally, the activist, where the scientist actually, if you like, leaves the academic and goes into the communities and works with communities to motivate and mobilize change, action for change. And these are decisions that individuals take about the kind of person they are and the kind of communicator they want to be. And so that's absolutely critical. So in relation, I said I'd come back to this, these are the salt flats in the Altiplano. And this just gives a really nice example, because it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is one of the most amazing places on the planet. And yet that is home to 30% of the world's lithium reserves. And lithium is a critical mineral in the energy transition, moving from to electric vehicles, for example, moving away from the combustion engine fossil fuels into electric vehicles. So it's very likely that across the world, as we move to the low carbon future, we're going to need huge quantities of lithium, which might mean us digging up places like this. So you can see that there's a technical aspect to this, but actually it's the ethical, moral dimension that's much more complex and confusing. And so I think that as science communicators, we're going to have to be broader in our outlook, and we have to think about our purpose, our mission in what we're trying to communicate. And hence that idea that I think science communication as general needs to be repurposed and more directed towards this notion of sustainable human progress. So thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now.